Hi, this is Corey Franklin with Remembering the Past, the show where we talked about people who've died recently who've had a profound effect on our society, our culture, or our history. Tonight's subject is inventors. We're going to start out with Wilson Greatbatch. Wilson Greatbatch was 92 years old when he died. He was born in Buffalo. He was named after Woodrow Wilson, and he was essentially a tinkerer all his life. He got a degree in electrical engineering, and in the 50s he came up with one of the most important medical inventions of the 20th century, the pacemaker. He basically came about it by accident, which I'll let him tell you in a second. But besides the pacemaker, he also invented any number of things, including tools used in AIDS research, a solar-powered canoe, and he worked on innovative forms of energy. But it was the pacemaker that he pioneered with Medtronics Corporation that became his greatest invention, and today over 500,000 pacemakers are sold each year. He also worked on the power supply for the pacemaker, which was traditionally a problem, and the lithium iodide battery which he worked on allowed pacemakers to function for far longer than the mercury batteries which had been used in the past. So even though he wasn't a doctor, he had a primary hand in one of the great medical inventions of the 20th century, and his ideas on power generation were something that he worked on until the end of his life. Here's a report on Wilson Greatbatch.
Curiosity and perseverance have kept Wilson Greatbatch innovating throughout his entire career. Along the way, he revolutionized telemetry, built a solar-powered canoe, and launched a $50 million company. Greatbatch holds 150 U.S. and foreign patents. His most famous invention, the implantable pacemaker, has saved millions of lives. Its unintentional discovery owes to another trait common among inventors, a mind open to the unexpected.
I pulled out the wrong resistor out of a box and got a 1 mega ohm resistor. And so this is 1,000,000 ohms instead of 10,000 ohms. And the thing went blip, and then a little waited a second, and went blip again. And I said, my good heavens, what did I do? I'm going to tear it apart. And I looked at it again. I said, what's a pacemaker? And so for the next 3 years, most of the world's pacemakers were to use that block and oscillator circuit because I pulled the wrong resistor out of a box.
Greatbatch continued to improve pacemaker design throughout the 60s, and by 1970, it became clear that a shift in the focus of his work was needed.
At that time, anyway, the problem was not pacemakers. They were going well. The problem was batteries. And so I told Earl Bakken of Medtronic, I said, you're never going to get a better pacemaker until you get a better battery. No, he said, I'm not going to jeopardize my only source of batteries by trying to make batteries. He said, I'm going to stick with the mercury. I said, well, I got to leave. So I left and became a battery manufacturer.
The company he founded to manufacture batteries, Wilson Greatbatch Limited, today makes 90% of pacemaker batteries worldwide. Greatbatch's success with batteries broadened into a more general interest in energy. During the oil shortage of the 70s, he sought to use the rapidly growing Androscoggin poplar tree as a renewable energy resource that could be farmed, chipped, and burned to generate steam. The need to have a reliable pedigree of poplar for dependably fast growth led Greatbatch to pursue cloning the trees. Soon, he was cloning a variety of plants and flowers, and eventually he experimented with a fish.
The fellow in Geneva who had been doing some work with us called me up, and he said, there's a fish that swims up in the Arctic Ocean, and the water that's 2 degrees below freezing doesn't freeze. The reason being he's got glycosides in his blood, which are genetically controlled, and they know there's a sequence for that. So he suggested we clone those nucleotides and put them into orange trees for down south, because every degree that you can drop the freezing point of orange is worth about $1 billion. Well, it didn't work. But along about that time, I noticed the New York Times were about what they were finding out about AIDS. This was back in the early days of the AIDS epidemic. And I thought, gee, that's really what we're doing. So I called this guy up and I said, could we use this against AIDS? He said, well, I don't know, maybe you could. And so we started working on AIDS, and we've been doing that for 10 years now, and we still haven't worked it out.
Though his AIDS research has yet to achieve its final goal, the work has led to patents for halting the reproduction of several related viruses in cats. But for Greatbatch, the measure of an inventor's success is the willingness to address a failed experiment with a fresh round of inquisitiveness.
You try something out, and if it doesn't work, you say, well, now, why didn't that work? I don't think the good Lord really cares whether you succeed or whether you fail. But I think He wants you to try and try hard. And that's all that's required of you. and my most abject failure may be part of some grand success in his sight may never take place in my lifetime. So I should not fear failure. But on the other hand, I should not crave success, because if I demand to be paid for what I do, whether it be in money or peer approval, or whether it just be to have this stupid experiment work, I'm asking to be paid for what should be an act of love. I should be doing this just because it's a good thing to do.
Today, Greatbatch uses his lifelong interest in energy to excite and inspire the next generation of inventors.
And the thing I could do most to encourage inventors today would be to somehow or other be able to do nuclear fusion. And I think I could do it using helium-3. And that's the way to go. You know, it's inevitable. It's going to have to be, and it's the way to go. Of course, I'm biased. I can just take a transistor radio like so and put that up close to it. That's a heartbeat.
Well, it's too bad that we lost Wilson Greatbatch, because if there was ever a man who could come through with that breakthrough discovery on the energy crisis, it would be him. And we're going to miss Wilson Greatbatch. We move on to our second inventor, and our second inventor invented something that, while it wasn't as important to humanity, it may be even more popular. A fellow by the name of Arch West died recently at the age of 97, and Arch West invented the Dorito. And as with the inventions, where serendipity is often part of the equation, being in the right time and the right place is important too. Arch West worked for the Frito-Lay company in the 50s. He was in marketing. One day he took his young family down to San Diego on a vacation. We've talked a lot about the 50s being different than the bland, boring generation that they're known as, that there was a lot of things going on culturally. But in one respect, the 50s were a bland, boring generation, and that was in terms of food tastes. There wasn't a lot of spicy food then, but you could see that there was a breakout coming with the growing Latin American population. So anyway, while Mr. West and his family were down in San Diego, they went to a restaurant where they served a fried corn chip. And this caught his attention. He brought it back to the people at Frito-Lay in Dallas where he was working, and they turned it into the Dorito. In 1964, they started making corn tortillas cut into triangles and seasoned with cheese and chili flavorings. It became a huge hit immediately. I'm not sure the people in Mexico would have gone for them when they were invented, but like other American cuisine in those days, it was a matter of perception. It was what people thought people from Latin America would like. It was sort of like chop suey, which wasn't an Asian dish, but it's what people in America thought Chinese people actually ate. In any event, you can't argue with the ultimate result. Next to Lay's potato chips, Doritos are currently Frito-Lay's biggest selling item nationally and around the world. Total sale of Doritos today is about $5 billion. So we certainly can't argue with what Mr. West came up with. At his funeral, where his ashes were buried along with those of his wife, his children made sure that everybody tossed in some crushed Doritos. And that's reminiscent of a Super Bowl commercial for Doritos several years ago. I'll just play the beginning of it.
At least he got his dying wish.
A jumbo casket full of Doritos.
That's a fitting way to say goodbye to Arch West, the inventor of the Dorito. Well, since we did two inventors tonight, we're going to close with, well, who else? The Mothers of Invention. I want to thank my producer, Sid Tepps. And we're going to close with Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Invention, who managed to get Flo and Eddie from the Turtles to help them cover the Turtles' famous #1 song and bestseller, Happy Together, written by Bonner and Gordon. So to remember the two great inventors, Wilson Greatbatch and Arch West, here are Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Invention doing Happy Together.
I think about you day and night. It's only right to think about the good and bad and all the time. So happy together. If I should call you up, invest a dime, and you say you belong to me, I use my mind, imagine how the world could be. So nearby, so happy together.